Hey guys, Bruce here again. Today I want to talk a little bit about pulling good comps for your flip. You know, there's nothing more important than getting the right comps and knowing what your ARV is going to be. And one of the things that I want to point out is 99.9% of the time when you sell that flip, somebody is going to get a loan on that property. And if they get a loan, 99% of the chance they're going to have an appraisal done also. I have never had appraisal issues. I talked to different investors who've, call me and say, hey, I can't get this appraiser to listen to me. He can't come up with the value. I never have that problem. But it's because I'm an appraiser and I know what appraisers are going to look for, and I always make sure that I have the proper comps to show them how I got to the value that I've got. So a few things I want to go over is, first thing is the definition of comparable, because I get people sending me comps and say, oh, this is what I use, this is what I use, and they're not comps. I mean, they are so far from being comparable. So let me just read a few definitions of comparable. Able to be likened to, similar, equal to, having features in common with something else to permit or suggest comparison. Conforming in every respect. So basically, you're looking for something that's so similar it's almost the same. I mean, that's ideal. Now, you're never going to find that, or you may be in one cookie cutter subdivision where you find one like that, but the chances of finding something so similar is very rare. But you want to find as close as possible and then make adjustments for it. So a little bit about appraisal basics, and how an appraisal works is you find comparables, and the appraiser starts with the comparable sales price, and say the comparable sold for $200,000. And then the appraiser goes down line item by line item and makes adjustments. If the comp is better than the subject, he's going to make an adjustment. If the subject is a little bit better than the comp, then he or she's going to make an adjustment on the appraisal for that. And then at that very bottom, you're going to come up with the adjusted sales price for that comparison. And if you do 3, 4, 5 comparables, all those bottom values are what that comparable is saying your house is worth. And once you put 3, 4, 5, 6, or how many ever down there, you get a pretty good idea of what your house is worth. That's basically how the appraisal works. Now, one thing about the adjustments, just a little tip that I use, there's two things. Let's say your subject house, your property is 1,500 square foot, and the comparable is 1,600 square foot. So the comparable is a little bit better. It is 100 square foot larger than yours. There's two little tips here. CBS, you remember that because that is comparable, better, subtract. So in this case, the comparable is 100 square foot better. So I'm going to subtract. I'm going to make a negative adjustment. 100 square foot, say the appraiser, just for rounding off, is doing it at $50 a square foot. So that's a $5,000 adjustment. Everything else is similar, is equal. It starts at $200,000. I've got a 100 square foot adjustment, which is $5,000. I take off $5,000. At the bottom, I have $195,000. That's what this house is saying my property is worth. Now, if it's a little bit better, say the subject, your property is a little bit better, it's 1,500 square feet and the comparable is 1,400 square feet, then I do SBA, subject, better, add. So in this case, I'd add $5,000 to that $200,000. So if the subject was 100 square foot larger, it might be $205,000 instead of $200,000. So just remember, CBS is comp better, you subtract, or SBA, subject better, you add. It's just a handy little thing to remember, because if you're out in the field going, oh, you're trying to figure out things, just remember those two things. That will help you. And then, as more comps that you have, the better. I mean, there is a point. The appraiser is going to have at least 3 and maybe up to 5 or 6. But the more that you have, the more it really shows you what your house is worth. So especially in the beginning, if you're not familiar, just add more comparables and just see what that value is. Five important items. Now the appraiser is going to look at all kinds of things, but there's 5 that I think are the most important that you need to consider when you're looking at your comparables, so that that you can present them to the appraiser and say, hey, this is what I used, and they will be good comparables for the appraiser to look at. The first thing is the I say at the age of the comp, it's not really the physical age, it's the date of the sale of the comp. Now, what you want is the most current, the most recent sales are the best indicator of the market. Not saying that you can't use a comp that's 9 months old. However, an appraiser can use up to 12 months, but if there are more current sales, they're going to use those first. And if you're just buying the property and you've got a 10-month-old comparable, well, that comp is out of date in 2 months. By the time you sell that property, it might be 4 to 6 months down the road, that comp is long gone. The appraiser is not going to consider that comp because it's over 12 months. If you can find comparables, ideally under 3 months old, that's great because in 6 months, they're still able to use them if there haven't been more current comps. That's an important thing. Don't hang all your weight on if only you have 10-month, 12-month-old comps. Be careful because the markets can change, and that's what lenders want. They want to see what the current market is indicating, and that's what's going to happen with sales under 3 months. And now some lenders will tell you, even though guidelines might be up to 12 months, there are lenders that can override those guidelines. And I've got one lender that says they want at least one comparable in the last 90 days and the other 2 comparables in the last 6 months. They don't want anything over 6 months. And that's because the markets are changing and they're concerned about that, and that's up to them. So the more recent the comp, the better. Keep that in mind. The next thing is location. Number 2, location. And I'm doing these in order how they are on the report, not as important as they are. But because they're all important, I think these are the 5 top things to look for. When I say location, I mean it's got to be in close proximity to your property. You can't go, say you're in a suburb or inside city limits, even though guidelines say you might be able to go up to 2 miles, you can't go 2 miles because there's going to be a ton of sales probably within 6 blocks. You've got to keep it in that close proximity. That's what you're going to have to do because no appraiser is going to ignore sales that are close to go somewhere far away. And I'll just tell you a quick story what happened one time. Back in the recession, there were people doing all kinds of things. Houses were selling crazy, and there were some shady things that went on. And I had a lender call me and said, hey, would you review these 3 appraisals? I sold these loans to an investor, and now they're questioning the appraisals. So he sent them to me, and I looked them over, and the 3 sales were selling for $75,000 to $77,000. And I started pulling comps, and there was nothing near $70,000. And there were a ton of sales within just 3 to 4 blocks. They were all $45,000 to $50,000. And I'm looking at the comparables this person picked, and they were 1.5 miles away. They were a totally different area just to make the numbers work to that $70,000. Well, this isn't just a mistake. I mean, this is criminal. And you can't go jump over a bunch of comps because you don't like those comps and use something in a subdivision way far away. You can't do it. It doesn't work, and no appraiser is going to do that. So location is very important, and I mean location and proximity to your property. Next thing is design. And one of the big things I think about design that are important is, say your property is on crawl space or slab. It has no basement. You really need to find comparables that have no basement. You don't want to use a bunch of comps that all have basement and finished basement and everything when yours doesn't. That is most appraisers are not going to do that. If there are limited sales on crawl space, they might pick 1 or 2 as a 3rd and 4th or 5th comp that have a basement. But that's not what they're going to look for. So you really need to keep, if the design is a 1.5 and a 2-story and your square footages are pretty similar, that's not that big a deal. Really, where it comes into play is the basement and finished basement areas, or no basement at all. You want to keep those things similar. Condition. Condition is number 4, and it is the biggest factor that's going to change the values of the property. To give you an idea, I bought a couple houses in a little area in Birmingham, about 3 or 4 years ago. It was a hot little area, but both these houses in the 90s, like with 93 and 97,000, somewhere in there. Rehabbed them and really made them nice and sold them $235,000, $245,000, in that range. The only difference, I did not add any square footage. I did not put an addition on. I did not add any square footage in the basement. The only difference between those 2 sales was condition. One was in the 90s, one was in the 230s and 240s. That is how much condition can make a difference. It's huge. Now, another point on condition. If you're pulling comparables, say you find the top of the neighborhood is $250,000. Look at those pictures. Look at the pictures of that house that sold and see what the extent of renovations are that they did. Because an appraiser is going to look at that also. Say that 250 had new roof, had new heat and air, had new windows, had new kitchens, new bathrooms, everything totally redone. Your renovation had better be totally redone. If you come to them with you painted the cabinets, you refinished the tile, you didn't put a new roof on, all these things you kind of, it's nice, but it's not as nice as that. An appraiser's going to look at that. Appraiser's going to say, hey, this thing was a total 100% rehab. Yours is nicely done, but it's not worth that $250,000. So you've got to compare renovations to renovations. It's a big thing. I had another quick story. I had an investor, 15, 20 years ago. He would buy really low-end properties. I'm talking under $10,000. And then he would quote, renovate them, and he refinanced them because he was keeping his rentals, and he would want $50,000, $60,000 after he was done. Well, I just went to the first one and looked at it, and he came in and sprayed everything a flat white. I mean, doors, trim, everything went white. Didn't do anything as far as, very little prep work, and then put that green indoor-outdoor carpet all throughout and put new plumbing fixtures, new light fixtures, but they were the cheapest possible light fixtures and plumbing fixtures you get. They probably wouldn't last 6 months. And I went to look at one, and he bought it for like $9,000. I guarantee he didn't spend $5,000 doing the renovation. And he wanted $60,000. He said, well, I think it's worth $60,000. I'm like, how can it be worth $60,000? Well, the renovated houses in that area were worth $60,000. No, your renovation is not worth $60,000. It just doesn't work. However, he found I didn't do it, but some appraiser did do it, $50,000, $60,000. And what he was doing was just taking a bunch of money out of it and using it somewhere else. And then, of course, down the road when everything hit, he lost everything and the banks got stuck with these junk properties. So renovations and the extent of renovations is important. Condition is really, really important. All right, the last thing, and that is it's the gross living area or the square footage of the house that you're doing and the comparables. And I say gross living area, GLA, that's what an appraiser calls it, and that's what they look at on the appraisal report. Now, I'm going to give you an example here. Say we have your house, your flip is a split level, and you walk in and you've got living room, dining room, kitchen on the first floor, and you walk up about 4 or 5 steps into the upper level, and that's where your bedrooms and the baths are. And your particular house has 3 bedrooms and 1 bath upstairs. All right, but you walk down in the basement and you've got a 1-car garage and you've got a bedroom and a bath in the basement. Okay, every realtor I know is going to list that as a 4-bedroom, 2-bath. People buying it, hey, it's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath because technically it has 4 bedrooms and 2 baths in it. Then the appraiser comes along and they look at it and they go, oh, well, it's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath with finished basement. Every appraiser is going to look at it that way. That's how the guidelines are set up. You need to be aware of that because it can cost you dearly in the end. I had an investor friend, and I've known more than one investor to do this. I had an investor friend that had 1 bath upstairs like that, 1 bath finished in the basement. And the appraiser came along and found 1-bath comps with basements. Their values were a whole lot different than 3 and 4 bedrooms with two baths above grade. A big difference, and it's such a big difference that he ended up selling that house that he did for $20,000 less than what he had it under contract for because it couldn't appraise. It is a huge, huge thing. You need to be aware of the square footages and in particular the square footages above and below grade. It's a real big thing. So I hope these 5 things will make you aware and really pay attention to that stuff because it can make all the difference in the world. I'm going to do another video and it's going to be a lot more extensive. I'll probably get the whiteboard out and really go into details about the appraisal. I do that for real estate offices and really get down and explain to them how the appraisal works. But these are the things I wanted to point out that are the most important, I think, things to look for when you're thinking and you're pulling comps. Anyhow, Until then, please, if you have any questions, shoot me an email. It's bruce@flipandbruce.com. And please like our channel, subscribe to it, and keep up with everything we got going. It's flipandbruce.com. Check us out there. And I hope you guys have a great one. Thanks so much.